March 28, 1979. A nuclear reactor in Pennsylvania begins to melt down. 3 Mile Island becomes the worst nuclear accident in American history. And for 40 years, its name means one thing: never again. Then Microsoft paid $16 billion to turn it back on. Not a government, a software company. In the next 20 minutes, you'll understand why big tech is betting billions on the energy source the world swore to abandon. For the past decade, tech companies told us the same story. Wind farms, solar panels, 100% renewable. Google, Microsoft, Amazon. They raced to look like the greenest companies on Earth. And then, starting in 2024, they quietly began buying something else entirely: nuclear reactors, restarting mothballed plants, funding experimental designs that have never produced a single watt, signing power deals worth more than some nations spend on their entire grid. Something changed. That something is artificial intelligence. Every chatbot answer, every generated video, every new model, it all runs on electricity. Staggering amounts of it. So much that the richest companies in history have hit a wall that money alone was never supposed to fix. This is the story of how Silicon Valley walked into an energy crisis of its own making, and why its escape plan runs through the most feared technology of the 20th century. Start with the scale of the problem. In 2024, the world's data centers consumed around 460 terawatt-hours of electricity, according to the International Energy Agency. By 2030, the IEA projects that demand will more than double to roughly 945 terawatt-hours. That is slightly more than the total electricity consumption of Japan, an entire industrialized nation of over 120 million people, matched by buildings full of servers. That is a doubling in just 6 years. And AI is the engine behind it. Training one frontier model draws a small city's worth of power. Serving it to hundreds of millions of users draws even more. The tech industry planned for growth. It did not plan for this. So why not just build more solar and wind? Here's the uncomfortable truth. A data center is one of the most demanding customers on the planet. It can't wait for the sun to rise. It can't slow down when the wind dies. It needs full power every second of every day, an uptime target of 99.999%. Solar produces nothing at night. Wind output swings wildly from hour to hour. You can smooth the gaps with giant batteries, but at data center scale, storage for days of cloudy, windless weather remains punishingly expensive. And even when tech companies want to connect new renewables, they join interconnection queues, waiting lists to plug into the American grid that now stretch on for years. The math was closing in from every direction. There is a fast answer, and everyone in the industry knows it: natural gas. Gas turbines are proven, and utilities can build them relatively quickly. But for big tech, gas is a trap. Microsoft has publicly pledged to be carbon negative by 2030. Google has promised to run on carbon-free energy around the clock by 2030. Amazon says net zero by 2040. These companies spent a decade selling investors and customers a climate story, and burning gigawatts of gas on camera would set fire to it. Worse, their AI expansion is already pushing emissions the wrong way. Google's own sustainability reports have admitted its footprint climbed as AI scaled up, not because it stopped caring, but because the machines grew faster than the clean power supply feeding them. So the fastest option was also the most publicly humiliating one. Strip away the branding, and the requirement is brutally simple. Big tech needs power that is 3 things at once: firm, flowing every hour of every day; clean, where every climate promise collapses; and massive, measured in gigawatts, not megawatts. Wind and solar are clean and cheap, but not firm. Gas is firm, but not clean. Geothermal is promising, but today it's still tiny and geographically limited. And hydropower is already tapped out in most places data centers want to be. Go down the entire menu of energy technologies and cross out everything that fails one of those 3 tests, and you are left staring at exactly one proven option: nuclear fission. The energy source with the best claim to being clean, firm, and enormous. is also the one America spent 40 years running away from. Why did America run? 3 dates. 1979, 3 Mile Island partially melts down. Official studies found no deaths from radiation, but public trust dies instead. 1986, Chernobyl turns a Soviet reactor into a global nightmare. 2011, Fukushima proves that even a rich, careful country can lose control. After each one, regulations tightened, costs exploded, and projects died. Utilities canceled reactors half-built. Existing plants shut down early because they couldn't compete with cheap gas. Public opinion, private capital, and political will all abandon the industry at the same moment. By the 2010s, nuclear power in the West was widely seen as too slow, too expensive, and too frightening to build. Which is exactly why what happened in September 2024 made headlines around the world, and why it made no sense at all, until you understood who was paying. September 2024. Constellation Energy announces that 3 Mile Island Unit 1, the reactor that sat right next to the one that melted down, is coming back from the dead. Renamed the Crane Clean Energy Center, it will deliver 835 megawatts of carbon-free power. And every single watt is spoken for by one customer. Microsoft signed a 20-year power purchase agreement, a deal reported to be worth around $16 billion, to feed its AI data centers. Nothing like it had ever happened before. A shuttered American nuclear plant, resurrected not by a government energy program, but by a software company's appetite. Constellation gets a guaranteed buyer for 2 decades. Microsoft gets the one thing money usually can't rush: hundreds of megawatts of clean, always-on power arriving on a known date. The restart is targeting first power around 2027. The most infamous name in American nuclear history is now, quite literally, a Microsoft supplier. And Microsoft was just the opening move. Amazon bought into Susquehanna, a nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, and is now investing over $20 billion to build an AI campus wired directly to its reactors. Amazon also led a $500 million funding round for X-Energy, a startup building a new kind of gas-cooled reactor. Google signed the first corporate deal in American history for a fleet of small modular reactors, 500 megawatts from a company called Kairos Power, with the first unit targeted around 2030. Meta put out an open call for 1 to 4 gigawatts of new nuclear generation, and its total nuclear commitments have grown to more than 5 gigawatts stretching into the mid-2030s. Added up, and big tech has now committed to roughly 10 gigawatts of nuclear capacity, the output of about 10 large reactors. For rivals, for different strategies, one identical conclusion. Most of these bets hinge on 3 letters: SMR, small modular reactor. Here's the idea. A traditional nuclear plant is a cathedral, a one-of-a-kind, gigawatt-scale megaproject, custom-built over a decade by an army of workers, where every delay compounds. An SMR flips that model. Shrink the reactor down to tens or hundreds of megawatts. Standardize the design. Build the major components on a factory line, ship them out, and assemble them on site. Many designs add passive safety. Physics, not operators, shuts the core down if something goes wrong. The promise is seductive. Stop treating reactors like cathedrals and start treating them like aircraft. Build the same certified machine over and over and watch the costs fall with every unit. Smaller machines also mean smaller price tags per project, millions to low billions. Instead of a single 10-figure bet a company can't survive getting wrong. That's the theory. Remember that word, theory. The money tells you how serious this is. Between the restarts, the SMR orders, and the equity stakes, more capital has been committed to new American nuclear in this decade than in any decade before it. And the deals keep getting more aggressive. The dream setup is what the industry calls behind the meter. Plug the data center straight into the power plant next door, bypassing the public grid entirely. Your reactor, your servers, your private energy island, faster to build, and every electron accounted for. But regulators have already pushed back. In late 2024, federal energy regulators rejected an arrangement to expand exactly that kind of direct hookup at the Susquehanna plant, worried that private deals could shift costs onto everyone else's electricity bills. Keep that tension in mind. It's going to come back at the end of this story. And then there's the moonshot sitting behind all of this. Fusion. Not splitting atoms, fusing them. The reaction that powers the sun, with no meltdown risk and no long-lived high-level waste. For 70 years, fusion has been the technology that's perpetually 30 years away. What changed is the machine itself. New high-temperature superconducting magnets let engineers shrink a reactor the size of a stadium into something that fits in a warehouse. And right now, outside Boston, a company called Commonwealth Fusion Systems is building SPARC, a compact reactor designed to do something no machine on Earth has done: produce net fusion energy, more energy out of the plasma than was pumped in. As of early 2026, SPARC is roughly 75% complete. First plasma is targeted for 2027. And if it works, its successor, a commercial plant called ARC, is already planned for Virginia in the early 2030s. Its anchor customer? Google. Fusion even has its own believer-in-chief. Sam Altman, the face of the AI boom, is the biggest backer of a fusion startup called Helion. Helion isn't building a science experiment. It's building a power plant called Orion in Washington state. And in June 2026, it cleared a real milestone. State regulators granted the licenses it needs to actually operate a fusion plant. Helion has promised to deliver fusion electricity to Microsoft by 2028, a timeline that even experts sympathetic to the company call extremely aggressive. Understand what that means. No commercial fusion plant has ever operated anywhere in history, and Microsoft has already signed for the power. So that's the bull case. Restarted giants, factory-built reactors, and star power. But before you buy the hype, we need to visit a field in Idaho, because this entire story has already failed once, and almost nobody talks about it. Meet NuScale, the poster child of the SMR revolution. It was the first small modular reactor design ever approved by American regulators. Its flagship, the Carbon-Free Power Project in Idaho, was supposed to prove the whole model. A cluster of factory-built reactors selling clean power to small-town utilities across the American West. Then reality arrived. The projected cost ballooned from $5.3 billion to $9.3 billion, before construction had even begun. The estimated price of its electricity jumped from 5.8 cents per kilowatt-hour to 8.9. One by one, the small utilities that had signed up looked at the numbers and quietly backed out. Inflation, interest rates, and first-of-a-kind engineering had done what no protest movement ever could. In November 2023, the project was canceled. America's first real SMR project died before a single shovel hit the ground. And if you want to know what happens when America actually finishes building reactors, look at Georgia. Plant Vogtle, Units 3 and 4, the only new reactors completed in the United States in a generation. They came online years late and cost roughly $17 billion more than planned, more than double the original budget. Georgia's ratepayers, ordinary families, were handed about $7.6 billion of that overrun on their monthly bills. Let that sink in. Families paid billions for a construction project they never voted on and couldn't opt out of. This is the pattern critics point to. The Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis put it bluntly in the title of its report. SMRs, still too expensive, too slow, and too risky. One analyst called NuScale's collapse absolute evidence that the claim that SMRs will be cheaper is false. Now add the problem nobody in the glossy press releases mentions: time. The AI power crunch is happening right now. Data center demand is spiking this year, next year, the year after. The gap between the demand curve and the delivery dates is measured in half a decade. Look at those dates. Kairos, around 2030. X-Energy, early 2030s. Meta's projects, 2032 to 2035. Fusion, honestly, nobody knows. Even the fastest item on the menu, the 3 Mile Island restart, doesn't deliver until 2027 or 2028. So who keeps the servers running in the meantime? Across the United States, utilities are racing to build new gas plants, with data centers cited as a driving reason, which fuels the skeptics' sharpest accusation that the nuclear announcements are a public relations shield, a clean, futuristic headline, while gas quietly does the dirty work of the AI boom. A green ribbon on the front door, a gas turbine humming out back. But hold on, because the other side has receipts too. First, restarting 3 Mile Island is nothing like building Vogtle. The plant already exists. A restart costs a fraction of new construction and arrives years sooner. Second, history shows nuclear can be built fast when a country commits. France built out a reactor fleet in roughly 15 years and still gets about 2/3 of its electricity from it. Third, on the data, nuclear is one of the safest energy sources ever deployed, measured in deaths per unit of energy. It sits alongside wind and solar and far below coal and gas. And fourth, maybe the most important, SMRs failed with small utilities because nobody could absorb the risk. Big tech can. It can pay premiums, absorb overruns, and wait. If the deepest pockets in corporate history can't push nuclear down the cost curve, then nothing ever will. Which brings us back to the question planted earlier. If this bet goes wrong, who pays? The Vogtle precedent says ordinary ratepayers. And regulators are already nervous. Remember, they blocked that behind-the-meter deal at Susquehanna precisely because private nuclear for AI arrangements could shift grid costs onto the public. The tech companies say it's different this time. Fixed-price contracts, corporate balance sheets, no taxpayer bailouts. Maybe. And to be fair, a power purchase agreement is not a subsidy. If Helion never delivers a single watt, Microsoft eats that loss, not you. But there's a second, stranger possibility. If the bet succeeds, if hyperscaler money genuinely industrializes SMRs and drags fusion into reality, then big tech will have accidentally done what governments failed to do for 50 years, make clean, always-on power cheap for everyone. Both futures are on the table, and the deciding decade has already started. So picture 2030. In one future, the Crane Clean Energy Center hums beside a rebuilt cooling tower. SPARC has produced net fusion energy. The first Kairos units are coming online, and reactor number 5 costs less than reactor number 1. The assembly line is finally working. In the other future, the SMR order book has quietly evaporated the way Idaho did. Fusion is still 5 years away, and a wall of new gas turbines is doing the real work, with emissions curving upward and utility bills climbing to pay for it all. The honest answer is that mid-2026 sits exactly between those futures. The licenses are real. The concrete is being poured. And so are the lawsuits, the delays, and the doubts. Both sides are spending money like they already know how this ends. This is what a genuine technological gamble looks like from the inside, before anyone knows the ending. Here's the irony to sit with. Artificial intelligence, the technology draining the grid, spiking demand, and terrifying utility planners, might also be the only force on Earth rich enough and desperate enough to finally fix the way we make energy. Not out of altruism, out of hunger. The same appetite that created the crisis is now funding reactors, restarts, and fusion machines that governments spent decades failing to deliver. Every previous energy transition was pushed by policy. This one is being pulled by demand. Desperation, it turns out, is one hell of an energy policy. So now I want to know what you think. If a small modular reactor were proposed in your town, clean, always on, and powering the AI you use every day, would you say yes? Or does 3 Mile Island still mean never again? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. If this video changed how you see the AI boom, that's exactly what this channel exists to do. One deep dive every week into the forces quietly rebuilding your future. Subscribe so the next one finds you, and you'll want the next one. Because while big tech shops for reactors, something else is already happening to your electricity bill. In America's largest grid region, power prices at auction just spiked by over 70%, and regulators are pointing straight at AI data centers. Families are opening bills they can't explain. Politicians are calling for a moratorium. Lawmakers in more than 30 states are fighting over hundreds of data center bills right now. Who's really paying for the AI revolution? That's the next video, the Great AI Blackout. It's already in your mailbox. Catch the pulse, lead the future. See you there.